Hey guys, Joe Garth here, creator of Brushify.io. Welcome to my new tutorial series, Brushify Bootcamp. In Brushify Bootcamp, I'm going to go over powerful Unreal Engine 4 features and workflows that you can be using with Brushify right now. These tutorials get straight to the point and are designed to help you become as productive as possible. So, let's get started. For this tutorial, I'll be using the Brushify Environment Shaders pack. This pack gives you everything you need to follow along. The objective of my mission in this tutorial is going to be importing 2 Quixel megascans textures. Once I've done that, I'm going to get them working on our own custom paint layer on the Brushify automaterial. So I've got one here for the sort of ground gravel, and another one here for the slope. Now of course you don't have to use Quixel megascans textures, you can use pretty much any texture from the Unreal Engine marketplace or one of your own textures, and the workflow will be exactly the same. So I'm just going to leap into Unreal, and when you download the pack for the first time, this will be the example level that you get with it. If you just go open level and go to multi-biome and open that level up, and you'll be able to see a level like this one. So yeah, this level's basically a test bed for sort of all the different material blends between different biomes, and you can see there are already examples in there. But we're going to be working on a new landscape from scratch for this tutorial, just to keep things simple. So go up to File, create a new level, and click Default. I'm not going to save that. And the first thing you're going to want to do is delete a few of the things out of this default scene. So I'm going to remove the ground plane, this sphere reflection capture, and also the player start. And the only thing left in the scene now should be a light source, a skylight, and a bit of atmospheric fog. So nice and clean. I'm going to go up to the modes panel, and I'm going to add myself a new landscape. So just drag and drop it into the world. And then if you go to location, make sure you zero that out. Now the material, I'm going to make sure that I've assigned the MI landscape material. That's inside your Brushify materials landscape folder. It's called MI Landscape. Just drag and drop that on and make sure that's assigned. And all the rest of the settings, I'm just going to leave to the defaults. It's a very small map, so hit create. So yeah, when you first hit create, everything's going to be completely black. That's totally normal. Just go up to paint, and you can see all the various different biome paint layers here. For this test, I'm just going to use grass, and I'm just going to add the grass layer info. If there's not one already there, there should be one inside the materials landscape folder. But if there's not already one there, just go create layer info and go and create a weight blended layer, and then just save the file somewhere. And yeah, pretty much just adding a layer info is pretty much all you need to do. One thing you'll notice is that there are these kind of grid lines. That's because the lighting isn't baked. You also have a warning message up here if that's not the case, if it hasn't been baked. So I'm going to go to world settings, and I'm going to force no pre-computed lighting. So that's right down here where it says world settings and then light mass and force no pre-computed lighting. If you don't have the world settings panel, you can just go up to window, world settings right here. And I'm just going to take force no pre-computed lighting. It'll come up with this little warning message here, but just hit OK. And then hit build, and it'll kind of run through some stuff, but then the lighting build will fail, and that's perfectly normal. It'll give you a bit of an error here, but that doesn't matter. And now you can see the grid lines are gone. So now we've got fully dynamic lighting. So yeah, I'm just going to save this level now, and file, save current as, and then I'm going to save this in my maps folder. I'm just going to call this Brushify Bootcamp. And the same with the level. Let's go Bootcamp. Okay, so now I have a perfect little test bed level with a very small terrain to kind of test out and tweak shaders on. It's really important that you make shader changes on a small level first, because if you have a huge level loaded that's got lots and lots of painting of different layers going on, it's going to have to recompile all of the shaders for every single paint layer that you've painted down. So if you just want things to, if you just want to work relatively quickly using a smaller map where you've only got like one paint layer painted down, that's going to speed things up a lot. So yeah, so the next step is of course going to be importing our textures. So I'm going to go back up to megascans and I'm just going to start downloading these textures. So hit download. Okay, great. So now I have both of those textures. I'm just going to extract both of those into different folders. And inside of the megascans folder, you'll get a bunch of files that you don't really need. So the thumbnail, the JSON file, and the EXR we can just delete. And these are the only real textures that we actually need. They're basically just JPEGs. I'm just going to cut those and go back into Unreal. And I'm going to go into Content and Landscape and Textures. And right inside that folder, I'm going to make a new folder. I'm going to call it Cliff Rock. And inside there is nothing at the moment, but I'm just going to right click the folder and go Show in Explorer. And then I'm just going to copy paste the megascans textures into there. And then it's just as simple as basically just a drag and drop straight into the content browser. From there, Unreal is going to do its work with importing all of those textures. Okay, great. And once they're imported, just hit save. There's only one very small modification that you need to make, and that's to the normal map of any imported textures. Just make sure that the normals are flipped in the right direction. With megascan stuff, usually you have to flip the green channel. So just open up the texture, and if you go down here on the right, you'll see that the channel here can be flipped. So yeah, just go to texture, expand that out, and hit flip green channel. And then hit save. And that's the only real change you have to make. If you notice it looking strange later on or not, or just think about changing that value and potentially it will fix your problem. Just depends where you get your textures from. Okay, so now we have the actual textures themselves imported. We want to do the next step, which is actually creating material functions for them. So this is basically something that will connect the actual textures to the shader. So I'm going to go into Landscape and then Materials. And you can see inside this folder, this is basically a folder that contains all of the various Brushify materials for all the biomes. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take an existing material, which is I think MF Mud. It's a really good example. And I'm just going to duplicate that, MF Mud. And instead of Mud, I'm going to call this one Cliff Rock. So exactly the same name as we made our folder before. And then open that one up. And now you can see the sort of anatomy of your typical material function. And yeah, so you can see that there are 3 different textures in here, and those are basically representative of 3 different levels of detail. You've got the global level, the macro level, and the detail level for very close-up texturing. So what we're going to do for the cliffs for megascans is I'm just going to apply the cliffs to all 3 of them. So just double click on a texture sample, and then here in the content browser we can navigate to our textures Cliff Rock folder. So landscape, textures, Cliff Rock. And from there we can basically just drag and drop the megascans texture, the albedo, onto this texture sample slot. And yeah, pretty much the same process for each and every texture sample in the function. And if you want a quick way to do this, if you've got this highlighted here in the content browser, you can just hit the little use selected asset, and then all of that will have the same, will be assigned. Okay, so once that's done, just hit save. And all of that's going to now be applied. So now we have, for the albedo of the Cliff Rock, everything is set up. Now there are a couple more settings inside of this material function that we need to deal with. You can see there's a mud roughness and mud height material functions that are being plugged into this material attributes node. We don't actually need those for now. That'll be something I'll talk about in a tutorial later. So I'll just remove those. And the other thing you'll notice is that there are normals assigned here. So this is another material function that's embedded inside of this material function. It's sort of a material function inception at this point. But this allows us to very easily kind of manage all of the different layers of complexity here. So the cliff rock is basically like a parent, and then within that parent are things like the normals, the height, the roughness are all kept within inside this material function. So everything's all nice and neat and in one place. So if I open up this mud normals, you can see that this is just another material function with exactly the same layout. And if we open up the content browser, we can see that there's mud and mud normals. So we want to create a normals material function for the cliff rock. So to do that, I'm just going to grab the mud normals and I'm just going to rename it. I'm going to duplicate it and then rename it cliff rock normals. Make sure I delete the 1 to keep things nice and clean. And yeah, just give that a save. But I'm going to open that one up. And yeah, so now I'm going to go to my content browser again, and I'm going to go to the textures, cliff rock, and I'm going to choose my normal map. And then same thing again, just click each of these texture sample nodes and just apply the normal map to each one. And then, yeah, that's everything we need to do there. Just hit save. So now we've got 2 different material functions, both with the megascans textures applied. So the cliff rock and the cliff rock normals. And the cliff rock normals are being referenced within the cliff rock. So that's going in there. And then, yeah, basically this is all the setup that's actually required for the actual material functions. So how do we get these material functions to actually appear on our terrain as a new paint layer? That's the next step in the process. So to do that, all we need to do is go to the landscape functions folder. And in that folder, you'll find a very important function that's called mf_landscape layers. Now this is really where all the magic happens. This is where all of the different material functions are sort of blended together in Brushify. So these are sort of the base materials that are being blended all together here, and those are the inputs, the material function inputs for all of those base materials. So when the grass gets blended, this is where the actual grass material is being specified. And if we scroll down, you can see there's also slope materials, and this is where the textures and materials for the slopes are defined. So these layers, the names there correspond exactly to the names over here. And it's really important that those names are matching with these names, because layer grass is the base will use this grass material function, but then the slope for that same layer will use this mf rock. So all of the stuff gets blended together there in just 2 places. Yeah, so if we want to add a new paint layer, all we need to do is go to the layer blend and hit this add element. And if you go right down to the bottom, there's a new element that's added there. And we're going to call this one cliff rock. And you can see that now we've got this completely new layer input right here for cliff rock. So we're going to copy and paste one of these mud node, this mud material function right here. And instead of mud, we're going to change this one to our newly created material function for cliff rock, the one we just made a minute ago. And we're going to get the diffuse and drag and drop and drag a line into the layer cliff rock input here in the layer blend. And that's basically everything you need to do for the actual base material. The other thing that we're going to need to do is do the same thing, but for the slope. So again, add a new element, and I'm going to go cliff rock. Make sure it's exactly the same name here. And I'm just going to copy and paste that. And again, let's put the... I always like to keep things organized. But yeah, just put the cliff rock directly into there. And we're going to change the base material later, but just for now I just wanted to make both cliff rock just to show everything's working. And once that's done, just hit save. Now this will take a bit of time to compile. And then we should be able to see in the landscape paint section a new paint layer. So if for some reason the paint layer doesn't show up, that's actually perfectly normal. It does for some reason take a bit of time for Unreal to sort of refresh and see the new paint layer. So there are a few things you can try. One is to just go to the sculpt menu, the paint menu, come back and see if it's updated, or just go off that menu entirely, go back onto the paint layer menu and just see if it's updated. What can also work, that usually works for me as well, is just to maybe just disconnect one of the nodes and then reconnect one and then hit save again. And that usually tends to jog it into working. Yeah, so now you can see that Cliff Rock is appearing in the paint layers menu. That's just something to do with the way that Unreal Engine updates this menu. It just takes a bit of, it takes a couple of compiles for the shader to actually register, for it to register in this paint menu. It's a bit of a strange thing, but I'm sure it's, eventually it will appear. So now we've got the Cliff Rock paint layer. I'm just going to create a new weight blended layer info, and it doesn't really matter where you save it, just I'm using the shared assets folder. I'm just going to hit OK and save that guy. So now I can start painting down the Cliff Rock layer. It's the first time I'm painting it, so it'll take a bit of time to paint. But yeah, there we go. So as you can see, something's strange with the normal map. So I'm going to have a look at that. Oh, and there is one small thing I want to do, which is add a post-processing volume, because without one, the map does tend to get very, very bright. So I'm just going to add a post-processing volume with some basic settings, infinite extents. That basically means that this post-processing volume will affect the entire map. And the other thing, I'm just going to change the metering mode to basic and dim the scene a little bit. And yeah, so we can notice that the normal map isn't the right one for the texture. So I'm just going to double check that now. If I go inside of, yeah, so this is where the issue comes. So basically, inside my MF Cliff Rock, I still have the mud normals assigned to this. So just going to make sure that I switch that out now for my newly created Cliff Rock normals, the one we made earlier, and then hit save. And because it's such a small map, it doesn't actually take too long for any big changes like that to propagate across. It's just a few hundred shaders to compile, and it won't actually need to do that every single time. That's just something that you'll need to do once in a while. But yeah, so now I have the megascans cliff texture successfully imported. I'm just gonna see if I can't run around the world a little bit as the player. Great. But one of the issues with this, of course, is this is actually a cliff rock texture, so it's more for the sides of slopes. It's not really something that's intended to be directly on the ground. So the next step is going to be importing my other texture, which is this kind of ground gravel here, Icelandic ground gravel, which looks like it should be better on the ground, whereas this one should be more for the sort of cliff walls. So yeah, back to my downloads folder, and here you can see that I've got this ground gravel as well. So I'm going to do the same thing as before, just delete the stuff I don't need. And cut that, go back to Unreal, and go to the textures folder, materials, landscape, textures. And I'm going to make a new folder here, and I'm going to call this gravel. And yeah, same thing, just going to show that in Explorer and paste that in, drag and drop into the content browser. And then yeah, Unreal's just going to do its job of importing all of those textures, just like before. And the normal map, I always make sure I flip the green channel. And then save. And then yeah, just all of these, hit save. Okay, so that's now my gravel texture imported. I'm going to make new material functions, exactly the same as before. Just going to duplicate my cliff rock, and this time I'm just going to call it gravel. And so I've got one for gravel. Now I'm just going to do exactly the same thing. Just go inside each of these. I'm going to choose my gravel, choose the albedo, 1, 2, 3, change all the texture samples to gravel. Then I'm going to change, then I need to make a normals material function as well. So I'm just going to save that one. And yeah, to do that, just same thing. Duplicate the cliff rock normals. Oh, I need to make sure it doesn't say 1 at the end. So I want to keep things nice and clean. And yeah, open that one up. And yeah, same thing as before. Choose the normal map. Change all of those to gravel normal map, and then hit save. And now we have both of our material functions. The one thing I forgot before was to, of course, update this little material function pointer inside of the main material function. So yeah, I'm just going to switch that now to gravel. So yeah, make sure you do that if your normals aren't showing up right or something. That's where the normals get assigned. So yeah, that's all of the material functions required then for that texture. So once you sort of know how to do it, it's relatively fast to, you know, just import new stuff and actually get it all set up. Yeah, so now I'm going to go back to the all-powerful MF landscape layers function. And yeah, this is this is where the magic happens, where everything gets blended. So what I'm going to do is, because I want to have this situation where we have the gravel on the ground and then the cliff layered on the slopes, and I want that to be one auto material. So I'm going to use the cliff rock auto paint layer that we just made, and I'm going to, instead of cliff rock on the base material, I'm going to use gravel. So let's change to gravel. And then now we can see that on base materials, this is now going to gravel. But on the slope material, we've still got the cliff rock assigned. So let's just hit save. And let's see how that looks. Just going to compile a few shaders. Okay, so now we have this gravel texture on the ground. Let's see what happens when we create a little bit of a hill. And let's see if the slopes will start to have a more cliff-like texture. Cool. So yeah, you can see that now I've got this sort of cliff-like texture that's coming up on the slopes, whereas the normal sort of flat terrain has this gravel. And I think Brushify is doing a pretty decent job of sort of blending that together. Of course, you know, there's no roughness, there's no displacement on this right now, so it just looks a bit flat. And, you know, usually you'd have just tons and tons of, you know, scattered assemblies and little bits of grass and, you know, rocks, pebbles, that kind of stuff that would kind of help the look. But yeah, this is very, it's a very good base to start sort of working on when you have a level. So yeah, I hope you guys found this tutorial useful. I think it's one of those really basic skills that, you know, can be super helpful. Just be able to get textures in from, you know, sites like Megascans and get them into Unreal Engine and you know, get them looking good. It's really you know, it's really one of those things that's a very important skill and something that will help a lot, you know, when you first start building a game. So, you know, upcoming tutorials, I've got plans to do, you know, a displacement one, a roughness one, and you know, just kind of keep using this example map to kind of just see how far we can get, you know, starting from this base, and just keep working our way up and going feature by feature through Unreal Engine, and you know, sort of just trying to clarify and make everything a little bit easier, you know, to understand. So yeah, really love the way that megascan stuff looks, and yeah, I think it's the perfect kind of merger, you know, taking some scanned textures and putting them into a shader infrastructure like Brushify just makes a lot of sense. So yeah, if you guys like this tutorial, be sure to subscribe and like my channel. Be sure to check out Quixel Megascans, and yeah, thanks a lot guys. Cheers.